Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Wonder Woman. So, this movie, like, from its original uh, reaction that I would probably had from theater would be like, man, like, I was really disappointed in this film, and man, is it so boring? Man, is there not enough action in this movie? So on and so forth. I think now I can go on because of a sequel that happened after this to just be like, or was I having such a harsh time about this movie? Like, really, I can see that there is some interesting things about this film. There is, yeah, a lot of waiting around to get to some really interesting looking action sequences. And, like, I can say that maybe this is not really the best origin storied movie out of any origin storied movie, but like at least there is some bits and pieces that I can have an enjoyable thing out of this film, and that's all that I really want to say about the Wonder Woman movie. Is really just that. Is like I can enjoy this movie a little bit more simply because of thinking of other films that are to be like Captain America or Black Panther or Thor, and just kind of like, oh yeah, this feels like this moment of some other action movie, of some other superhero film. So going into uh, this thing here, we have mostly a very time period piece taking place during 1910 during the World War One. Yeah, we do have some time of which uh, where Diana is to give us an opening that is to be much more tied to whatever the current time of this DC bubble is, mixing into, of course, the dawn of justice, and eventually what is to be Justice League the movie. But so I would say that it's kind of interesting to have like a time period piece here, but it's really just Wonder Woman going and fighting humans throughout most of this movie, if she is even fighting anybody, because eventually we're going to have just Wonder Woman eventually fight aliens or monsters or whatever. So I guess we just have to compare her a lot to the normal, common, mostly male, but because time periods and so on and so forth, and how like we have to, of course, have uh, Dr. Poison, who is to be a female doctor, which I'm like, okay, that's cool that we end up having this character. But of course, to yeah, be having a formed face here, but like very creatively, visually interesting character that they bring to the table for this film. So, with that said, uh, like this movie, grading wise, would have to possibly be really a like I would have to say that this movie is to be a okay film, like an okay to good movie. Um, but really, I would never want to go out of my way to like watch this again anytime soon. Maybe 10 years from now, I'll go on rewatch this movie and be like, yeah, like it's still a slow film. It's still a slow, boring origin movie. But I'm just kind of wondering of what we're going to see next, possibly from Wonder Woman, if we are going to actually continue on from everything that is to be connected from the Snyder cut. Because it seems that anything after the Snyder cut, it's like, oh yeah, like we're gonna definitely go back to any number of these characters and use them in some future project. Because we also have the Flash movie that is coming somewhere down the timeline thing of soon. So with that said, uh, so yeah, so I think that's all that I really have to say about this film. Um, like it's a boring movie. It's the most boring origin film ever. Just because there's rarely any action in this movie. There's rarely a time where I kind of like also don't get annoyed with this film, but there's some fun things going on with this character, much more fun than the sequel. So that's and I also like the villain at the end of this movie. Like I finally am just kind of like at a point of like ooh like relief when we have like the villain at the end of this film, where I'm like oh thank God we have something going on here. Great. You like because any real villain that Diana has, she completely just wipes out just so easily. But then eventually, when Diana had finally met her match, it's like, oh, thank God! Like, there's more of a action sequence thing going on here that I can much more enjoy. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to just go into spoilers about this movie, talk about it, and so yeah. Um, I think that's all that I wanted to say via the cryptic thing because I was thinking like, is there anything else? I think I'm good. So let's go into spoilers about this one. Let's go into that double five because otherwise that time yet again to go into this thing called spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to do spoil this movie. So we of course have the opening of this movie with Diana mentioning that she wanted to save the world at some point because there is some like magical and unbelievable things, but she also is to realize that there is some darkness also in the world. Paraphrasing a lot here, I'm not going to be going through word to word, but we transition from the globe to make our way to much more focus in on the Louvre Museum in Paris, where it seems that Diana is, of course, being the curator of the Department of Antiques, where we have Wayne Enterprises, who is to be delivering her some uh, photographic gift of the original photo that was taken of her and a bunch of the other guys that she was with in the, of course, time period of World War One. So, which is 1910. So we end up having one thing that I was a little like I thought it was weird, where we have like Wayne Enterprises who like they stopped and they're parked, but I guess they don't know where the entrance is of this Louvre. So they have to go all the way around to make it into the Louvre, or maybe that was just the place where they had to forcibly park, and so they had to shoot that scene, but then have these people walk all the way around this very expensive artifact to give to, of course, Diana here for Diana to open this thing up and have a note from Bruce saying like, "Hey, this is the original. Uh, at some point, you have to tell me your story." And so that's all of a sudden having Diana just going on and feeling very nostalgic to remember her whole entire life story and tell you about it now. So we have now Diana as a very small kid who, of course, is going on and watching a bunch of the Amazons practicing and battling. And we have Diana going on and looking at uh, Antiope, Antiope, who is to seemingly be Diana's aunt. It seems like, And if I'm wrong about that, it seems that also this is to be, uh, of course, uh, the Mascara's best warrior. So whether or not I can figure out some way to not have to consistently say that name and so on and so forth, to have to go on and mispronounce that name through some point of here. And so we have very young Diana being chased around by some Amazon named Niobe, and trying to get Diana to come back and go into her schoolings. So Diana is continuing to run around, running away from Niobe, to then be grabbed by her mother by the hand, who is to be Hypatia. Hypatia? Hypotia? If I'm even saying that close to somewhere correct. And so Diana's mother is going on and having Diana like to really just be disciplined here, but the real discipline is for Diana, like, hey, like, you won't learn to train yet, like, it's not your time, you're far too young. And so instead Diana's mother is going on and telling her a story about Ares, because Diana's mother is to tell Diana that she of course was carved from clay and brought to life by Zeus. So Diana's mother is telling her the story of Ares, who had gone on to have all the gods uh, be manipulated or persuaded by him to uh, take down mankind or to kill mankind, uh, simply because he had gotten jealous of them. And so he just wanted them to be wiped out. And so the gods had all decided to not go against Zeus. And so Ares had decided to go and just kill them off one by one by one, to all of a sudden have Zeus come in and now have to kill his own son. And so after that, Zeus had given the Amazons the weapon that they are to need to use against a god, if ever there was a time where a god was to kind of come down and fight amongst the Amazons. And so Diana is to want to see this weapon. And so Diana's mother is to take her to the armory tower to then show her the God Killer sword. And so Diana here is, of course, going like, ooh, like, what a cool sword. But we eventually find out in this movie that this sword is basically just a thing for Diana to wield when she is to take it. But it really does bubkiss nothing. It's not any it's not really anything much more viable than her to just have some kind of normal sword with her. Like, there's nothing unique about it. It's not actually the God Killer. They just have this sword in place just to, like, just have a trophy of it. Because it does nothing. Kind of dumb. So now, we let's go on and let's talk about Steve Trevor. So, Steve Trevor is to, of course, be British intelligence disguised as a German, because he is to go on in a German plane and to fly in with all of the Germans and go into their secret military installation, in the Ottoman Empire to go on and steal secrets. Steal secrets, of course, from a general called Lunderdorf and Dr. Moreau, who is to be called Dr. Poison in this film, which I'm never actually going to call her Dr. Moreau. I am going to call her Dr. Poison because obviously that seems to be the cooler name, and why wouldn't I just call her that? Why wouldn't they have even consistently pronounced her as nothing but Dr. Poison because it sounds cool? So Steve Trevor goes on and is to notice that both this Lunderdorf and Dr. Poison are testing this gas, noticing that they had failed an attempt to kill off some man and destroy this gas mask that he is wearing, because it seems that the gas that they're attempting to want to put together is a thing that not only kills the gas mask but then goes on and kills the person. So there's no way for them to put on a gas mask because it kills both simultaneously. Excuse me. So we have Steve going on and secretly, without anybody looking, going and stealing Dr. Poison's book, and is to run off with it to then go on and steal one of their planes to fly out of there so he could make it to London to give his superior these secrets that they're putting together, that they're concocting, and so on and so forth. And Steve, while flying this plane, is of course to have this naval carrier of sorts go and shoot him down, to have a bunch of lifeboats try and retrieve him, and Steve Trevor's plane ends up crashing into Themyscira, to where eventually a much older Wonder Woman is to go and try to retrieve him from these waters. But let's get back to that. So Diana is to, of course, want more and more to train, to learn to fight. And so we have Antiope, who is to go on and, of course, do what Diana is to want. So she secretly trains her up until the point of her becoming 12, and then her mother ends up finding out that she's doing this, and so we have it where her mother is like, okay, like, if you guys are going to do this, like, train her to be the strongest Amazon out of everybody. Like, train her to where she's stronger than 5 of them. Train her to where she's stronger than 10 of them. And train her to where she's stronger than any of us. Because supposedly Diana's mother's fear is the stronger that Diana is to get, the, of course, point when Ares is to realize that Diana is to even be a thing. And we also weirdly have Diana's mother thinking it's like, well, the more that she knows, the more Ares is going to come after her. And it's just like, what else does Diana need to be able to have, like, Ares just kind of really interested in her? Like, does the more followers she has on her Twitter, what? Where does it end? Good God. That's the kind of funny thing that I was thinking about this movie, where, like, Anyways, it's like Ares is kind of like the jealous lover of a breakup that never really happened. Where he's just like, like I want to see what she's doing over there. Like I'm starting to get really interested and see what's happening. Is she with another man? Oh, she is. She's with that Steve Trevor. I'm interested now. It's kind of like Ares is like that weirdly in this film. So so Diana is now doing this training session. Coincidentally, her best possible training session, and because she's going on and like defending herself pretty well against all of these Amazons, and so now she's having to fight her Antiope and or Antiope. I'm gonna ill pronounce his name till the end of it. So uh, she then uses her bracelets to block this sword coming at her because she of course loses her sword, and then these bracelets end up uh, going on to be this kind of vibranium Captain America's shield like impact, to where all of a sudden this girl tries to hit these bracelets as hard as she can with this sword, for her all of a sudden to get knocked the heck back, as well as a number of all these other Amazons. And so uh, Hippotia, I'm going to ill pronounce that, is to start to get worried about Diana. It's like, oh no, like she's starting to get really strong. And so Diana is to go on and is to find Trevor in the ocean. And so she retrieves him and then goes on and is to notice that these Germans are to make their way with these lifeboats. So we have the one German who is to kind of touching in between these two worlds, and then he goes through and he's like, oh, all right. So they start to make their lifeboats to get to Trevor. And so Trevor is going and taking his gun and is kind of like trying to defend Diana as they're kind of behind these rocks here. So all these Germans are to make their way possibly onto shore, but before they exactly make it there, all these Amazons make it to this one spot and go and fire all these flamed arrows. And Trevor's mentioning about these Amazons. It's like, they have guns, right? No, they don't. So we have these Amazons who are to fire off these ropes to then kind of pull them to kind of swing side to side. And one ends up getting shot by this gun. So eventually these Germans start to make it closer and closer on shore. With these flamed arrows, they only just kill people. They didn't really burn much of these boats. So these Germans start making their way onto shore and are starting to have this gunfight battle. But it seems that really these girls are to be so well trained that even guns are no real match for them. And we have that one really cool spot where Antiope is to, of course, call for some girl to like give her her shield so she can jump and then fire 3 arrows at these Germans and kill them off. And but then realizing that Diana is mixing her way into this battle and Trevor is starting to shoot some of these guys, and uh, and Antiope is uh, going on and kind of jumping in the way of this one gun to save Diana. And then Diana, of course, is clutching her uh, surrogate aunt. And so this woman is telling her, it's like, get the God Killer, go after Ares. Ugh. And So Diana is realizing it's time now. She's realizing that she is like ready for battle, and but now they want to understand why Steve Trevor is here, and Diana is kind of defending Steve and saying like, "Hey, like he was with me, like he was like fighting against them." But they're like, "Well, hey, you have the same outfits that they do," and Trevor is like, "Well, there's a reason for that." And so they go on and they ask him, it's like, well, hey, who are you? Why are you here? And Steve is like, well, I can't really tell you that. And they're like, yeah, you're going to tell us the truth. Because Lasso incoming. So Steve goes into this room where he is to be forced to be told the truth because of Lasso of Truth. So he, of course, divulges that he's from British intelligence and that he is fighting this war, that numerous people have all died, and a ton of countries have all been intertwined in, and that he is, of course, a spy for British intelligence going and getting information from the Germans. And like Trevor's also saying his name and rank and everything, and he's like, God, like why am I telling you all of this? And they're like, well, hey, like the lasso of truth forces you to tell the truth. Like the more that you struggle, the more pain you will just receive, and it'll just force you to tell the truth anyways. So now that Diana is to hear this talk about this world war, Diana's like, well, hey, like we should get in on this because we're like really thinking on how this is like a unbelievable like war, that maybe this has some actual tie to Ares. And they're like, no, like if anything, like we're not going to go outside our little bubble here to like be mixed in with this war. Like what are we like what are we gonna change? What are we really gonna do here? And so of course Diana's mother is telling her that she is forbidden to go off uh, to go with Steve to help him out in this world war. And so Steve is to go off to then soak in this tub, and Diana's wounds are, I guess, to start healing up. And so Diana meets with Steve to kind of like get more information from Steve, but Steve ends up getting out of his little tub in an awkward time because all of a sudden he has no clothes on, and Diana's like, are you kind of the normal average kind of like a picture of mankind? And Steve is like, well, I'm a little bit above average because he's a spy and so on and so forth. So Diana's like, ah, what's that? And so Steve is kind of looking down and he's like, oh, like you need my watch. So Steve has mentioned to Diana that Steve had gotten this watch from his father because his father had told him that there were to any if there was ever to be anything wrong going on in the world, like Steve could always do one of two things. He could either do nothing or he could do something, and he's done a lot of nothing, so it's time for him to do something about it. Which kind of clicks into Diana, just like, well, yeah, like I've just kind of been sitting here, like forcibly wanting to train and forcibly wanting to like defend Themyscira, and all I'm doing here is just sitting idly by while there's a world war going on that may uh, determine determine how the world that she is to live in is to play out. So, and plus, with Trevor saying that there is a number of countries that are involved in this war, it's like, well, why isn't Themyscira tied to this world? It's kind of like Aquaman and Atlantia and Atlantis, where like eventually Aquaman is going to be involved in the Justice League because like he should also have a say with the whole dark side of things and the whole Steppenwolf event and this and that. So then we go on to have, of course, both Diana and Steve are going to sneak away against Diana's mother's wishes to go off onto this boat to then uh, go off to London. So Diana is going to the Armory Tower, and she's kind of having to like jump really high to get into this armory, where she is going to take the lasso of truth and then take the God Killer, and also get a Wonder Woman like outfit to go and fight her war that she wants to go on and do. But we have her with this big, thick, like wool, like a fur coat that she kind of hides her costume until it's the big time to reveal, which is going to take forever to do, but it happens. So, because I guess we have to re earn this costume if we technically haven't already seen it through either pictures or through another film. So, we really have to re earn Diana wearing this costume, but it seems like we have to re earn everything in this movie. That's why we end up getting like an hour and 15 minutes in, we get a really interesting action sequence, but then that all of a sudden just fades away. So, like, because the Amazonian stuff is kind of interesting, like the Themyscira stuff is interesting, but it's a lot of just training and practice and whatever for the most thing until we actually get to the Amazons fighting the Germans, and that can kind of wet my whistle a tiny bit, but I'm really wanting a real legitimate fight out here, which doesn't happen until way the end of the heck this movie, to where we actually get a big, massive brawl, fight out, whatever. So, it takes forever to get there. So yeah. So, we have Diana making her way to Steve to go on this boat. And of course, Diana's mother, all the other Amazons are arriving to stop her, really just to tell her, like, hey, like, farewell on your travels, because, uh, like, I'll allow you to go. And because Diana's mother realizes that she needs to go to fight Ares, because, like, she was basically born to do so. So, we have, of course, Diana getting the uh, gift of the crown of the woman that had died to save her. And so Diane's mother had mentioned, like, this is the crown of our best warrior, and now you're going to have to represent and keep it real. And so Diana, of course, takes the crown of the woman that had died for her and is to go on onto this boat. As Diane's mother is to say, it's like, well, the happiest moment in my life was having you in it, and now that you're leaving is going to be the most sorrow part of my life. So Diane goes off with Trevor onto this boat, and so they're having these weird and goofy exchanges about both Trevor asking Diana about the mascara and uh, and Diana asking Trevor about the outside world, because this is technically on the same planet, but weirdly we're having these two people in weird kind of bubbles and whatever. So we have this one part where Diana is saying, it's like, well, hey, like, why are you sleeping way over there? And Trevor is just like, well, uh, like we're not really like a couple, we're not really married. And Diana's like, well, what is marriage? And so Trevor has to go and explain, well, like two people under a judge is to be like said that they are to be in love for the rest of their lives. And Diana's like, well, does that always work? And Trevor's like, no. And she's like, well, still, like, why aren't you just going ahead and like sleeping next to me? And Trevor's like, well, technically I have slept with women, but like Trevor's really trying to be a gentleman out of this, and but Diana just gives so many convincing things and stuff here that Trevor is to just like be like to the point of being so like I guess it really doesn't matter. I'll just sleep with her. I'll just sleep next to her, and so all of a sudden Trevor is to also ask Diana. It's like, well, hey, like, have you ever did you basically ever get the birds and the bees story on Themyscira? And so Diana goes on and mentions that there is a heavy book section of a number of things that they could try or do or whatever. And Steve is like, like, okay, well, do you happen to have any of those books on you? And Diana's like, well, I'm really looking at it. All of those books eventually render a man being a part of that equation pointless. And so Steve is like, well, okay then. But it would have been nice to just have one of those books handy. So they go on to sleep, and there's there's sometimes where it either feels like uh, Diana is like either like sounding sick in this movie, or it feels like Diana is kind of annoyed during this film. If she isn't already having to basically tell everyone that she's having to do everything throughout this whole entire film. Like, oh, hey, like, you don't go on and do whatever you're going to do. I have to go on and do every single thing. Because I'm Wonder Woman, so I need to go on and do everything. To where when Steve kind of recruits all those guys for this merry mission, I'm like, what are they even there for? Like, what good are they? What is the point of having them on this mission? Because it just feels like Steve could have gone on with Diana and they would have done just as well. Really. So, so yeah. So we have, of course, Diana making it to London, where the very first thing that she needs to do, which is going to be the most exciting thing in this whole entire movie, wardrobe changes. Her having to wear clothes for that time period and having to like go through a number of selections simply for her to have to showcase that she can't really fight in this clothing that is to be have been put together for this time period. So we have both Steve and Diana going to a place called Selfridge and Company Department Store, where they, of course, are to meet Etta Candy, who is to be Trevor's assistant, where they go into this whole stretch of um, dialogue where Etta is to mention that she ends up doing everything for Trevor, and she, of course, is to assist Trevor in whatever he needs. And so Diana is like, well, that sounds like slavery. And Edda's like, I like this girl. And so it's like, okay, whatever. Like, does she get paid? Yeah. She must get paid by somebody. So we. So we have Diana go through and start picking out clothes, which she rips and tears through, simply because she's like, well, how can I kick uh, in this dress? How can I punch people with this thing, with this clothes, with this whatever? So eventually, they finally go on and find wardrobe that looks actually identical to what Trevor is wearing when they get out of this store. And so once they finally make it out of this store, Trevor needs to go and take this book he took from Dr. Poison and bring it to his superior. That is to, of course, be at the Superior War Council building, where these guys are chatting about their plans for this war. So while Trevor and Diana are making their way to this building, they find themselves to be followed. Where I'm like, this kind of feels like a very Captain America like moment here, where Diana and Trevor are kind of hiding in this alley, waiting for these guys to come in there so they can go and beat them up. And once one guy starts firing a bullet, we realize that Diana still has her uh, bulletproof bracelets on for to kind of deflect some bullets here. And so once Diana starts taking these guys down, and one guy is to run out of bullets, Trevor is to get a good punch of one of the guys in the face, and there, of course, is to be another guy where Diana is to lasso and to take down. And by the time that they start interrogating him for information, he takes a cyanide uh, pill out of his mouth and dies. We also had the one moment where Diana was walking around with still her shield and her sword, looking all barbarian like. And so they were consistently telling her to, like, kind of point her sword down, or just kind of not have her, like, have this kind of, like, stance like she's going to be ready to murder anybody. And so Diana is forced to give her shield and sword to Etta, and of course Diana is telling this woman to, like, protect this with your life. So they now go on to make it to this Supreme War Council building, where of course Steve is just wanting to go into this room, but of course with Diana just wanting to be involved in every single thing, Diana is to make it into this room where all of a sudden everybody who was kind of just chattering into this War Council building is to be dead silent, for all of a sudden Sir Patrick to go on and say some words uh, to eventually talk to these people. And so we have Steve, who's trying to talk to his superior because what he is to give him is of vital importance, much more important of what is going on here. But Steve's superior is telling him to wait outside, and of course with his woman. So Steve's superior is to come out there after this meeting is over, as well as Sir Patrick is to come out there also, to just kind of see what all the fuss is about. And so we have Steve giving his superior this book and telling him, like, hey, this is a book from Dr. Poison. It seems like they're having this plan of this gas that is to be a real, like, it's going to kill a lot of people. There's no gas mask, and there's no thing to eventually stop this from killing people. But we also have Dr. Poison, who's coming up with a concoction for only Lunderdorf and Lunderdorf himself, for him to go on and consume, and for him to be drastically much stronger than he was before. But we don't really have this really be like a necessary thing that he really needs. And even when he actually takes this, the first time around when he takes this for a mission, he doesn't really need it. Like, he already released this gas, and is killing people, why did he need to take that breathing gas pill thing at that point? But then when he ends up taking it the second time around, when he is to go on and fight Wonder Woman, that's when he actually needed that. That's when it actually made sense for him to have that pill, that whole breaking thing, for him to be able to inhale that, to then try to fight off Wonder Woman, to have a quasi even match with her. That actually made sense. So we uh and so they end up testing this new gas, on these number of people, and they all end up dying. And so they're like, yeah, this thing really works. So we're gonna have to test it on a bigger scale of things, which is to kill off a lot of people involved in this war. And they're coming up with this very futuristic looking bomber plane at the tail end of this movie. So we have both Steve Trevor and Diana eventually going on to talk to this Field Marshal Haig and a number of these generals, and trying to convince them of this gas and all this other information that, of course, Dr. Poison is to have in this book. And so this field marshal isn't convinced enough to send Trevor out there to take these people out. And so Diana just gets really upset, because she's like, well, like, you know what? Like, in Themyscira, we have our highest uh, women fighting alongside everyone else. Like, all you guys are all generals, and you're all just sitting here on your seats doing nothing, just telling people what to do and where to go, and to basically die for you while you're sitting on that chair. So we have, of course, uh, Trevor and Diana, like, just going out of this room. And so Trevor is telling Diana that they're going to defy these people, and try to stop this war anyways. And Diana is like, "Are you really telling me the truth here?" And so Trevor goes and grabs Diana's lasso, and is, of course, then touching this lasso and saying that this plan is awful, but they're going to go and do it anyways, to try and end this war. So Trevor goes onto this bar to find a guy named Samir. Samir, who is to supposedly be a liar and was to try and be an actor, but sadly enough, he didn't have the right skin tone to go into that line of work. So Samir is convincing these guys around him at this table that he is to be some prince from somewhere. And Trevor is like, "Hey, you're a prince from nowhere. Come with me because, like, I want you to do a job." And so Samir is like, "Hey, man, I've been working these guys over for a while now, and you just come in here and you just blow my cover." And Trevor's like, "Well, yeah, because I need you for a job." So the next contestant to be put into this group is to be a guy named Charlie, a guy who is now fighting some bigger guy in this bar. And Diana is thinking that the bigger guy is going to be the one that they choose, but actually the one that they're choosing here is the much smaller guy, who is to be this trained sniper who is to be able to pluck people off from a long distance off. And so Diana is to basically call Charlie a murderer. And so he's like, well, hey, like, that's what he was trained to do. So we, of course, have Charlie, who, of course, uh, had started that fight with that bigger guy because he had accidentally taken this guy's drink by mistake and started drinking it. And so that's what caused that whole fight there. So now we transition to have both or all of this group now having to go and take this like boat, this train, this whatever to go and find their last guy who is to be this smuggler. So Diana's like, wait a minute, like you have like a really like a bad guy group of people here. You have a liar, you have a murderer, you have a smuggler. And so Trevor is like, well, hey, like when really looking at it, I was technically all three of those guys or all three of those things that you otherwise despise because we have Trevor who is to be undercover who had to lie about who he was. He had to go on and murder a bunch of Germans, which of course Diana saw him do to save her. And then Trevor had to smuggle that book from Dr. Poison to give to his people to have them have more information that they weren't going to have before. And so Trevor's like, well, yeah, like, so I'm a liar, I'm a murderer, and I'm a smuggler, so deal with it. Like, do you still want to be a part of this gang now? And Diana's like, okay, sure. So as long as she can go and find Ares, because that's all she cares about every single time she's asking, like, hey, where is Ares? Like, bring me to Ares. And Trevor's like, well, it doesn't quite work that way. We can't figure out who Ares is. And so, but they end up just assuming that Lunderdorf is to, of course, be Ares because it's the thing that makes the most sense. So we have them making their way to a guy called the Chief. And so once they are to make and go and find this guy called the Chief, they end up all going on and camping with one another. And Diana is to, of course, ask why the Chief isn't in some kind of military attire. And the Chief is to go on and say, well, like, my people have already fought a war against Trevor's people and we had lost. So I'm not going to go into another war again to lose even more. So we then go on and realize that I guess Charlie's having a nightmare and he wakes up to have all of a sudden like Diane like yelling at him to wake up. So we have that. So we go on and we have Trevor, who is to try to get Diana really in the real part of war, where she is to start to see people uh, who are telling her that parts of her family are getting enslaved, and so Diana is wanting this to stop. That this woman is like crying and with her baby and telling that family members of hers are getting enslaved. So Trevor is to tell Diana, it's like, well, hey, where we're at right now is called No Man's Land, and we're kind of just stuck here at a place called Vled, and we can't be able to have our forces be able to get past these German forces to then save this village. So Diana's like, well, if you can't do it, then I will. Because, of course, she has to show off here. So Diana goes on to, of course, make it fairly far because she's blocking all these bullets that are kind of coming at her. And then eventually she whips out her shield to start blocking all of these bullets. And she's like getting pelted with all these explosives and all these things, but she's just kind of knocking them away like they're flies. So we have Diana having this shield here, and so since these guys are so um, like concentrating on Diana, like everybody else is like, well, hey, like let's run out there and let's try to help her, and like we'll probably be able to take down all these guys because they're so concentrating on her that like they're not going to be looking for us. So all of a sudden they end up finally breaking through this no man's land to then go off and make it to this village, to where now the cool part of this, especially once Diana like runs to kind of block all these bullets and explosives and whatever, which is also pretty cool. We have Diana now getting into this village, where then she uh, has Trevor uh, kind of shout out to Diana, like, hey, shield, because the guys are to go and put this one, uh, like, kind of chunk of wood thing for Diana to jump on, to have her jump uh, into this one building to then go take all these guys out. And the only way of which that Wonder Woman can go and do so. And so Diana is to, of course, save this town, and so now there is to be a man that is to want to, like, hey, like, can I take a picture of of you um and all these guys, because you saved our town, you saved our village. And so let me pause here for 1 second. But Diana goes through and takes down the church bell tower, supposedly. It's where she goes in and like fights everybody. So we then go on and we have Trevor uh, going on and calling, of course, his assistant, uh, Etta, and telling that he, of course, is in Fled. And Etta's like, oh, that's good, because you're right around where the Germans are going to have some German high command gala, and you can go on and possibly get Londendorf there and take him out. And but Sir Patrick is also in the same room, and Sir Patrick is telling Steve Trevor to not go in there, and because like they're so close to almost possibly wrapping this war up, to not go any further, and to kind of like tip your hat to these guys to let them know what's going on. So we of course have Trevor and Diana going to this gala anyways, and so Steve, of course, is going to teach Diana how to dance here, and Charlie, of course, is singing, and it's very unusual for him to sing, I guess, because it's been a while since he has done so. And so we go on and we have some fun here, because technically these guys have won a place that seemed unwinnable. So we then go on and have Wonder Woman and Trevor making their way to this gala, where Trevor was to, of course, want to go alone, because Diana was going to possibly kill Londendorf uh, at this party, and Trevor didn't want that. So we, of course, have Diana go and find Londendorf at this party. And so we end up having immediately Londendorf, who's going on and mentioning uh, about all of these gods. And so we really have this seemingly all be so coincidental, that this guy's going on and on about all these gods and about the god of war, and that he never really wants this war to end, kind of thing. And there's so much dialogue that is to seem that Londendorf is the god of war here, and it seems that Diana is convinced. So we all of a sudden have it where Diana is to want to chase after Londendorf, and what they end up finding out instead is that these guys were to shoot off this this missile to go and take down the village of which that both Diana and Trevor and their group had just saved. And so Diana is racing off to make her way to this village to find out that everyone is now dead there. And Trevor tries to go into the village with her, but he realizes that he'll die if he goes in there. So now we have the chief and Samir and Charlie, who are all trying to track down exactly where Londendorf is. And so they're going to send a smoke signal to, of course, tell Trevor and Diana where Londendorf's armory airbase is, so that way they can go and find him and like finish up this war. So we now go on and have Diana making it to this airbase, and she of course is to merely want to have this resolved, knowing where Londendorf is. And so she goes on and is racing off to go and take down Londendorf. And so now Steve Trevor and with his men is chasing after her. But instead of actually taking Londendorf down, because like Wonder Woman is just going to do that, they decide to just start poking their heads into this location to find out that they are to have this bomber plane, of course, being ready to take down any number of places, with Dr. Poison being in this area. So we also had the moment in the gala where Trevor was going on and trying to win over Dr. Poison, and was trying to romance her and mention about fire and how it's kind of a comfort to him and so on and so forth. But then all of a sudden when Diana starts strolling in, Dr. Poison's like, like you're just like every other man. Like you're saying that I'm winning you over now, but it looks like your eyes are wandering somewhere else. So Dr. Poison is not exactly won over by this guy. But like Dr. Poison mentions that she, of course, is with Londendorf. But it seems like she's really tempted to trade up with Steve and Trevor. So we go on this airbase, and so we of course have Wonder Woman going through and decking everybody, and so she makes it to Londendorf, and Londendorf is to take a big whiff of his blue concoction from this thing that he keeps taking. And so now it seems that he is a decent enough match for Diana here, but still, like, he is to kind of grab this one device and chuck it at her. But it seems that still Diana is still going to just like beat the crap out of this guy, lasso him, and all kinds of stuff, and then take this sword and stab him to then kill him off here. And she ends up going and muttering this whole thing about how she's the daughter of the of Hippotia and or Hippotia, and that like she's gonna like do this for Themyscira and this and that, and like kind of doing the "my name is Inigo Montoya, you killed my father, prepare to die" kind of speech. She's kind of doing that here to go and kill a Londendorf, thinking that he's Ares, but it doesn't really seem there's real legitimate evidence here that Ares is really that guy. So all of a sudden, Diana is to realize, and the dialogue that is to happen after Londendorf's death is to just be such a, like, God, it just feels like they had, like, their dialogue here was god awful, that they didn't, like, know what to frickin' say here. It seems like their lines were getting all jumbled all over the gosh darn place. And I was like, what the heck are they even saying here? It just seems like all a jumbled mess. Because after Londendorf is to die, the war is to not stop. She's like, I thought if I killed Londendorf, like, all of this would stop, and it's not. And Trevor is just like, well, like, maybe it's not the god of war. Maybe it's just us. Like, maybe, like, there's no real way to stop this war from happening. And so we keep going on and on about them, like, talking about humanity, and, like, Diana is just really just disappointed that she came all this way to go after this guy, and maybe she'll never really go and find Ares. Maybe she'll have to just take down every single person until this thing stops, and this is like a never-ending battle war scenario. But then all of a sudden, we have Steve going off to make it to this bomber plane and to take off with it and to eventually say his goodbyes to Diana, with Diana not being able to really hear him. And so, but eventually she realizes what he is to actually say later on. So Trevor goes off into this bomber plane and is to try and detonate it into the air, of which he does. And when he then explodes being within this plane, Diana is to, of course, now be like unstoppable, because she, of course, has that motivation of beating Ares because of Trevor's death. So, but let's back a little bit. So Diana, after talking to Trevor, is to realize that the God of War is here. It's just not the person that she thought it would be, and it's actually Sir Patrick. And so Sir Patrick has arrived and is telling her, it's like, well, yeah, like, you didn't think I would be uh like a person that you wouldn't be expecting, and instead you thought, like, it would have to be an evilish, villainish person, but it wasn't. So Diana is to continue to try to, like, circle around to get closer and closer to the God of War, but every single time she does that, he ends up in another part of this little place here, because he keeps teleporting to certain parts to get further and further away of Diana, or away from Diana. So eventually, what forcibly happens is Diana finally gets close enough to Ares here to finally use this god killer, this sword. And so Ares, of course, is like, this sword was pointless. If anything, the sword is not the god killer, you are. Like, that was the whole reason why you were sent by Zeus to be trained by the Amazons, is because you're the god killer, not this sword. So we end up having, of course, finally, Ares having his kind of, like, backstory of, after that battle, after that war, he, like, didn't get killed, but he just kind of was waiting it out for the perfect time for him to create this world war. So now Ares and Wonder Woman are kind of fighting it out here, And I think the coolest parts is when like Wonder Woman is using her lasso as like a defense mechanism to just kind of take down some of the weapons that Ares is to have here. I think that's possibly the most interesting part because everything else is really just from a distance here where they're kind of chucking things at one another, or Ares is using something to squeeze Wonder Woman, or there's just like this a lot of back and forth thing going on here until all of a sudden Wonder Woman is to get so upset and she ends up seeing Dr. Poison there for all of a sudden Dr. Poison to then lose her little mask thing to show her real face. And it seems that Wonder Woman is wanting so much so to just crush Dr. Poison. But she's like, no, like, I'm not going to do that. Because the real enemy is Ares here. So we go on and have Wonder Woman eventually slowly but surely beat of course, Ares, who is CGI'd Ares that just looks so weird and so goofy. Because sometimes he has his helmet on, sometimes he doesn't have the helmet on. Sometimes it just, like, I guess they didn't perfect this whole CGI thing through a lot of this because it's Warner Brothers and they just don't have the best budget for CGI like stuff. Also known as the sequel to this movie, where we have Cheetah versus Wonder Woman. Man, did that have to be just so much in darkness. Ridiculously so. So, so Wonder Woman is fighting off with Ares, and then of course she ends up beating him. And so we have, of course, because the main motivation for Wonder Woman is that whole Trevor speech, and then she's like, it's like so she outpowers Ares, and then she ends up using her bracelets to like blast away Ares, and is to of course take him down, and so we now have it to where the war has technically finally stopped, and so now everybody is celebrating that the war of this is finally over. And so now they have all these pictures on this wall of everyone who had died. And so Diana is looking at the picture of Trevor and she's like, like he's dead now. So we now have, of course, Diana, after that whole scene, is now in whatever this current time thing of this is, to remember that whole moment that she was to beat Ares and win that war and so on and so forth. But now she's back at the Louvre, and so I guess her motivation here is to continue on fighting the good fight, and I guess not doing it from Themyscira, but doing it like from where she is now. So we have Wonder Woman that ends up having this big massive jump that is to be the ending of this. It's kind of like how like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies would end, with him going and like kind of like sticking on to this one American flag or some other kind of thing that we consistently see Spider-Man Tobey Maguire do to end a film. Like that's kind of what we do here with Wonder Woman just kind of going like like this big like fist shot whatever of a thing. So with that said, I think that covers most of this movie. There is probably some things of dialogue that I didn't go into. There might have been some specific things that I didn't exactly mention here. But with that said, I think this is good enough to call it a day. So I'm going to go out of my way to get the heck out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.